Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
Oh, I'm in my favorite, one of my absolute all-time favorites. Now, a friend of mine is in Italy right now, and she's in Rome, and she's sending me pictures of the fountains, sending me pictures of the Vatican, sending me pictures of the steps, the Borromeo. I mean, you
Hmm.
can't, it's hard to beat that,
Right.
but where am I?
Is that Sedona?
Monument Valley.
Monument Valley. Okay.
So your Sedona's sort of in the Midwest of Arizona. This is way up on actually right on the border with Utah. It's spectacular. Um,
Right.
so, my sister is going to be very happy that you not no, who is it? Oh, it's another listener who mentions, how does Deirdre get this right? You've got to start switching up the pictures because we want to have Deirdre get it right on you. And I didn't even warn you before I put this picture up either, did I? Didn't say, Deirdre, I've got a new picture. You're going to have to guess.
No, you didn't. I got the state right.
You did get the state right. Yes. Oh, okay. You won. You
Yes.
won.
Right.
Especially since I've been asking you what the weather's like, and I've been talking to my family up there, and it's a little, this is the dreary part of spring in New England.
Well, actually, the trees are flowering, although it was below freezing for the past 2 nights.
I
So,
rest my case.
yes.
All right. So nobody cares about this stuff, Deirdre. They just don't care. But what they do care about is understanding a little bit better about the discussions we've been having. So, and I know you and I both independently, we've had discussions with a number of people, including, I think it was what your doctor that said she didn't know actually where she could go to actually see a podcast, much less to define what it was, right?
Right. Mhm.
But regardless, we do have a lot of people that we want to make sure that they're grasping the full definition of what we're talking about when we talk about some of these concepts. Because when we do talk to people, they're talking about, some people are talking about it in great depth, but they're talking about it in one dimension in great depth. And we're talking actually about multidimensional use of these products. And especially right now, in the use of AI, because it is what's giving us all this power at the moment in the enterprises and in the entrepreneurial world. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to you.
All right. Well, Tom, you and I have been talking about the confusion we're seeing out in the world about what this AI stuff is. We're reading about how ex-tech leader and ex-business person are out there talking, creating a lot of confusion, anxiety, uncertainty, and frankly, fear among the general population. I think people have a sense now that you can't get a job coding anymore, when just 6 months ago, coding was the safe major. Similarly, people are hearing about all of these layoffs that are happening. I mean, you and I think some of this is AI washing, and some of it is some future projection. But all of this is doing, all of the chatter in the media, all of these contradictory statements from people, all of the lack of information about what's really going on is causing, indeed, this anxiety and fear that we've talked about. At the same time, you and I introduced a concept in our last video, the jagged frontier, which we picked up from the MIT Tech Review, which means that there's a tremendous difference in perception about AI models between the tech people who have a 73% understanding and liking for the models because they're using them to do the coding and tech and scientific work. And then a 23% liking among the general public because I think about of all of this anxiety and fear. In other words, there's a 50 percentage point difference between what the tech people think about these AI models and what the general public do. So we decided to spend this video and our next video just digging a little deeper into some of the underlying concepts to try to pause and develop a deeper understanding among our listeners about what we think is going on here and about the potential for the use of AI in businesses. And I'll stress that you and I talk about the use of AI in businesses, not for just coding or not for chatbots or emotional support or whatever people are using chatbots for, but the use for productive business work. Um, and that's probably where we start by saying most people have a perception of these models as simply productivity tools in the way that, say, some simple uses of, say, software programs are productivity tools. But let's project this concept into the scenario you and I have been talking in, where you've been taking the position of a board chair, I've been acting as a CEO, and we're both about to go out to our board of directors and to our management team, talking about how both have to develop a deeper understanding of the use of AI models, which we want to bring to our organization. And if the non-tech people on the board and in the management team have only this 23% liking for the AI models, we're going to run into serious problems. I can see, for example, my CMO saying, "What do you mean I have to use these models for more than productivity and marketing? We're doing the marketing stuff. We're, using the models for basic productivity and we're successful, so I've got to use them more." Well, that's breaking down the conversation into what these models can provide, how they support the full range of marketing work, for example, and how the CMO can get even greater benefits from the use of the models, but even more so that when we get to some of the basic concepts, and we're within a minute or two of starting to discuss some of our basic concepts in more depth, that there will be even greater expectations about the work of all of the people leading functions in the business, all of the board of directors doing their jobs of governance and oversight and providing guidance and so forth within the organization. Um, so that's what we're really talking about here, that we're clarifying basic concepts and terms. We're going to suggest how people can get more out of these models and then talk people through what it means to get more out of the use of the models. And the best place we can start is with the whole concept of horizontal versus vertical. A slight sidestep before I get into the horizontal and vertical, and that is you and I, Tom, have been operating at the C-level for decades now. We've both had multiple C-level roles and so forth, and we both know that the best way to operate at the C-level is to build your mindset and build your instincts based in the mindset so that you can act quickly, make decisions quickly, understand quickly, sort out information, and understand what's right and what's wrong quickly based on your instincts that you develop. And we are suggesting that people who are going to be using AI at the level we're talking about and getting into in some depth here have to start to think about developing their AI instincts in addition to their functional instincts. We call this the 50-50 split, and we'll get into that a little more in another minute or two. But understand that this use of AI at the level where it provides tremendous value, productivity, and benefits to the organization means developing instincts about where AI can be valuable, where it can't be valuable, what AI can provide, what it can't provide, and understanding instinctually where a use of AI is productive or it's going off the rails. And you always have to understand that it can be productive or off the rails in itself, or where people are using it to a degree that it shouldn't be used. That's something you have to understand and perceive fairly quickly. So with saying that, let me go back to the whole concept of horizontal versus vertical. Now, you and I know that when the data revolution happened, and it's probably about, 15 years ago now, when people really started to understand that the use of data can provide great value to an organization, people started to talk about how much data is trapped within various functional silos in the organization. And a lot of the data revolution, and that includes the data analytics revolution, the machine learning revolution, was working toward getting structured data out of the silos and capturing unstructured data so that people could make better decisions using the organization's full range of structured and unstructured data, bringing them to the point where the decision is made. And that's what we're really talking about here, but in a greater sense when we're talking about the horizontal versus the vertical. We both know that even with the 15 years or so of talk about the data revolution and the data analytics revolution and all of the talk about capturing all of the data around the decision points, it hasn't been happening fully. That people have still been holding on to their data within their various functions. They've been using it as almost a power position that I've got this data, or I'm the one who knows what unstructured data exists in relation to my structured data, or I'm the one who will decide what data you have. The whole idea about the use of AI models is that by their very training, they will capture the data across an organization and bring it up to a layer, which you and I are calling the AI insight layer, so that all of the data in the organization, that's from all of the functions, all of the structured data, all of the unstructured data, will be available to everyone in this insight layer, so that when people use AI models in a way where they prompt and get responses from a model, they will have the benefit of the model tapping into all of the organization's data. Now, this is at the very top layer, just basic research, just basic, the first step in our 5-step process. This is work the machine does. This does not mean that the machine tapping into this data in the insight layer provides the answers we want. What it means, according to our 5-step process, is that it finds the data that will help us as the humans in the human and machine partnership, going through the 5 steps, come up with greater insights and greater proposals for benefits to the organization as a whole. No more doing all of this work and finding out, oh, if only I had this sales data, I could have done a better job of making decisions. Because the model will find that data in the insight layer and set it out for us. Now, I'm talking about the 5-step model. Let me remind our listeners what this is. We have the machine starting by doing research. That's what I've been talking about right now. The machine researching all of the organization's data that's available in this insight layer. Then we, as the humans, come in and interact with the machine in this, the second step, the interaction step, where we may say, that's fascinating, Claude. Could you explain more, or could you find more, or could you relate this data to the data that I see over in the sales function? And then Claude, or whichever machine we're using, will do some more work based on our prompts. Then we may decide in the 3rd step, the context step, that we like what we're seeing here, but Claude or whichever machine does not have all of the context that we have. So we will feed more context into the machine. And then the machine will take all of the data, all of the insights it's starting to develop from the insight layer, from our interactions and the context. And then the fourth step, it will synthesize everything. It will come out with some basic insights, some basic data points we should look at, some basic connections that it thinks are valuable. But then in the fifth step, we as the human, stepping away from the machine and acting solely as the human, takes this input and then comes up with what we are going to propose to the organization as a whole, as a strategy, as strategic initiatives, as responses, as ways that we can be working, as so forth. In other words, as the work of the leader. That's what we do when we act in this fifth step in the process. But this is all enabled by having our horizontal layer, which captures everything out of the verticals, by having the insight layer created by capturing all of the data, all of the insights, all of the work from all of the verticals there, and then us working on that. This is the very important point that from some of the questions we've gotten from some people that haven't quite understood what you're talking about here. It's not that the AI model is coming up with all of these insights. It's putting together all of the data, all of the work to present it to us, and then we take that further. And we ourselves develop the strategic insights, the strategy, and so forth. What I'm saying right now ties in with one more very basic concept, which I'll present, and then I'll turn this over to you, Tom, to take this a little way further before we move on to the next set of concepts that we'll be talking about. And what this is what we talk about when we talk about the 50-50 split. What you and I say is that the work of everyone in the organization, but especially the work of people at the top, of the CEO, of the C-suite, of the board of directors, of functional leaders, of top-level executives, is no longer solely going to be organized around the requirements of the function. It's going to be organized around both the functional expertise and then what we're calling work fluency. And the best way I can describe work fluency is what I just described when a leader works through the 5-step process to get to the point where the leader can come up with the insights, use the insights to then develop the strategy, the strategic initiative, and the work of the organization. What it is knowing the processes of working with AI and the AI models to tap into all of the data of the organization, to see what's happening in all of the functions of the organization, to develop a cross-organization understanding of what's happening in the organization and what should be happening in the organization, to see what context across the entire organization has to be developed into the data. It has to be combined with the data to develop a real understanding of the organization and what's going on in this organization and what might have to change in the organization to move the organization forward, to see how it all comes together and therefore make decisions for the organization as a whole. We no longer have, say, a chief sales organization, chief salesperson, just developing a sales strategy, only seeing the sales data. This chief salesperson not only sees the marketing data, sees the financial data, knows what people are available by seeing the human resources information, knows what trends are happening in the marketplace by looking at the market research that the organization has done, is tapping into the competitive information, tapping into the consumer surveys, the purchasing information, and on the basis of all of this data, developing the sales strategy for the organization. And for this chief salesperson, it's not just the functional expertise of knowing how to run a sales program, knowing how to direct salespeople, or knowing how to put together the various sales tools to create a functioning sales department. It's knowing how to tap into what the AI model provides, knowing how to tap into the data, all of the different data of the organization, seeing the sales and the strategic initiative organization, and knowing what the people across the organization will be doing that then lets that salesperson create the best strategy for the organization as a whole. That's what we mean by work fluency. That's the work fluency of getting out of the sales function itself and tapping into the work of the rest of the organization, knowing how to do it, knowing how to bring it to the sales function, and therefore doing the best job for the organization as a whole. Now, I've been talking for a while here, Tom, and I know you have a lot to say about this. So let me turn the floor over to you to take this forward.
Deirdre, I don't want to stop a beautiful thing. You were doing tremendously explaining what you and I have been concerned about. So I didn't want to stop. What what we think is changing in the equation, what's changing in the equation is where we now have the ability to see value streams where they were much more difficult to see in the past. So those of us that spend our life thinking about business and working on business, we've always seen the value. And a great way, if you have a hard time thinking about value streams, here's a way that might help you. When you focus on getting something operationally correct and really well done, that's much more of a functional thing. If you think about Tim Cook, for example, when he was at IBM, he was there when I was there at one point. He was well known for being an operational expert. He was in the chip area. He did a tremendous job of focusing on logistics systems, getting it to run correctly and really well at scale. And he's carried that over to Apple, and they've done a tremendous job with that. What makes some changes we're seeing now is much more of what we call the value stream. And a way to think about value stream might be user experience. What is a user experiencing in what you're doing? And that is where you're seeing what you call the horizontal aspect of a business, that the user only sees the end of that stream of value that's being given to them. They are given the result of the building of that value in that stream, that horizontal stream. The individual who's replacing Tim Cook as CEO of Apple, he thinks like that. His approach to the world is value stream. Tim Cook's was much more of an expertise on operational excellence. And I think what we're going to see with Turnus is a focus on the user experience. You can tell by what he's done and where his focus is and how he thinks. That was actually much more the Steve Jobs approach. His approach was even more that way, to the point of coming up with products that weren't even successful in the marketplace. And you have to have real, entrepreneurial instincts to try to see the market and do that. But I think that's the change. And by the way, he appears to be just as expert as Cook is at the level. He's functioning at an incredibly high level. So I think all indications are that's an excellent choice
Right,
from what we see, right? You never know until somebody's in a position whether they do it well, right?
right.
Because they're not in it. Now, if Tim Cook, who's staying on as chair, uh, if he has selected this choice, and which I have little doubt because he's a brilliant man, he understands this. He's making a brilliant choice because this is where you and I think the world is moving to this value stream. We've been talking for years about how the thing that's going to be valued in the future is the user experience. Take another example I can give you. One is the difference between one of the Amazon companies named Audible. I have to do that just because of some other issues I have. I have to use Audible for when I'm not doing professional reading. And then I have a lot of issues, Deirdre. That just happens to be what a minor issue, right? A
Right.
minor issue compared to other issues. But then you've got Grok, let's say. Okay. So I had a question about both, and they were pretty much concurrent. And this was, I don't know, a month ago or so. So I got hold of their chat, which was the way I was directed to go to chat. Um, it was the experience at Audible, which is an Amazon company, which currently, unfortunately, focuses on execution. Now, execution, Deirdre, I can order something at 10 o'clock at night and it's at my door at 4 a.m. here in Arizona. It's nuts.
Right.
Um, that execution of that is incredible. But I was basically, they solved my problem, but didn't tell me they were solving my problem. And they didn't want to have to admit why they were solving the problem and why I had the problem. So they just cut me off. But
Hmm.
next thing I know, the problem was solved.
Yeah.
Nothing. Done. And I'm sitting there and it's very late at night, right? And this is like 11:30 at night. I'm sitting there, wait a minute, what just happened? And then I say, okay, I gave up and I went back and it was fixed. Now, Grok, I had a scalability problem because I know I push Grok, but I pay for Grok just like I pay for everything else. But I don't pay for the most extreme version. I only pay, I don't know, $30 a month or something. By the way, I spend annually about the same amount of money with Audible as I spend with Grok. So we're not talking about a different level of my expectation because I'm spending the same bulk amount of money per month from these two services. They immediately engaged with me, worked with me through the chat to solve the problem. And then I got an email from them the next day saying, did the problem sustain? Or was the fix, has it sustained? And if I have any questions at all, please contact this person at this email address, right? And I was talking to a chatbot the night before. So it's a subtle thing. Did my problem get solved? Did it get solved in the same amount of time? Yes. What was my experience? Well, one, it was ragged. And I'm saying, oh man, okay, you solved it, but it didn't feel good. The Grok thing felt great. And by the way, I feel differently about the two companies. I don't feel warmly toward Grok. I love Audible and Amazon. So it's nuts, right? But that's the difference. I have a lot of respect now for the way that they're treating that. That's a value stream. We think that's going to become ever more important. And as we move towards these things, we have the capabilities to do this now and to run our businesses this way and to collect information, as you just said, that way. The thing that we have to keep in mind, and this is another one that came up with somebody I was talking with yesterday, underneath all this, the systems underneath, the transaction systems that we know and love, logistic systems, accounting systems, planning systems, they have to still work. They have to still be there. The question is, to what degree do they need people supporting them? And that these tools may help make the ability to support these better. So, could we see that maybe we're going to see some people that will be subjected to being laid off because of the efficiency in the support systems? Yes, but what's the other side of that say? What we're seeing now is when AI is being used in what you and I would say, the bulk of what we're seeing and what we're reading about, especially you are reading about in your work, is where people are employing it for what you and I would call deep functional exploitation, right? Or complex work down, programming, really getting into depth and analysis work on selling and the sales cycle and the business development cycle. By the way, using all the tools everybody's used before, Salesforce and the like, but using the AI capability to do that complex work, that's incredibly valuable. You and I would call that vertical work. That is the vertical functional expertise, functional depth.
Right.
That is not part of the value. That is not the value stream. That is part of the value stream, right? We see an equally valuable piece of work with that same rigor going this way, but it's now, instead of applying it to the sales team or the biz dev team or the marketing team or the engineering team, it's applying it to the senior leadership and the boards of directors and having them apply that same functional depth, but we see it as a different term. We see that as work fluency. It's the fluency of the value stream and being able to see that and analyze that so that the work that we're recommending that senior leaders and board directors get their heads around is flipping that work that you're seeing really switched on people doing in these areas and turning it this way. Why? Because they can, and because some people are doing it, right? And that's the reason why we're saying this, that distinction you just have been making about vertical versus horizontal work, about the application of the depth needs to be turned this way. And what was concerning you and also me is we're having deep discussions. I'm having two more this week. I had one couple last week. They're talking this way. Yes,
Yeah.
they're using it all right. They're really getting into it. By the way, you and I love that. That's
Hmm.
tremendous and hugely valuable. And a point somebody made to me yesterday, Deirdre, your point about whitewash, and I know I'm giving you a core dump because I sat here and I had it ready. That's where I got all of this, right? I built that
Right.
whole thing while you were talking.
Right.
But you were inspiring me to make sure we make these points. So let's talk about this point about whitewashing of laying people off. Okay. Somebody who I respect a lot um, was saying yesterday, look, are you going to get some people in the support area that they're going to be perhaps replaced by AI? Yes. But let me give you the counter argument. Do you think that as the sales team and the marketing team become more productive and drive more growth because of the work they're doing to improve the quality of their work and the quality of the results of their work, that's going to drive growth? What does that do? It drives the need for more people in these functions supporting the growth. So he says, do you really think we're going to lay off salespeople? So what happens though? And this is the thing that you and I talk about. So what are they whitewashing? What they're whitewashing is the people who can't do that, right? Who didn't ever really adopt email. And I know people are going to pull their hair out when we say this because they said, well, I don't know anybody who didn't adopt email, right?
But they didn't.
But they didn't.
Right.
They're not in the workforce. And the same thing applies here. Give it 2 years, give it 18 months, give it 3 years if you're being really generous. It won't be just a handful of people doing the deep functional expertise or complex work in functions. It's going to be the bulk of the people. And then what happens? If you're not doing that, you're not competing. And you're now, Why won't you do that? This is a point you've made constantly all along here. It's a choice now. It's your choice. I'm going to stop and let you pick this back up because both of us have spent a long time individually here. But I want to turn it back over to you, Deirdre, to now take us, here. And the point I was making is about the choice you make as to whether you do adopt this. And this is a point you have strong opinions about. So I want to turn it over on that point and then let you direct the conversation.
Right. You've been talking a lot about the whole concept of work fluency, and I'll forecast for our listeners that our next video is going to really dig deep into this whole concept of work fluency. But just to repeat what we mean about it, it means that you may think of your job as being a functional job, operating in a function, and you do your job a certain way. What we're suggesting is that jobs are going to be split into two parts. One is your functional expertise, and the other is how you actually carry out the processes of exercising your functional expertise. That there will be the expectation, the increasing expectation that you will be tapping into the AI insight layer, what we mean by that is the data stream, the value equation, whatever you want to call it, the company-wide information as opposed to simply working within your function. I mean, you and I, Tom, how many meetings have we sat at where they have the heads of all of the departments around a table and someone says, okay, tell us what's going on in sales. And the chief salesperson stands up and gives a beautiful presentation about the sales programs and what each salesperson is doing. And meanwhile, everyone else around the table is saying, but this has no relevance to what's happening to the other parts of the organization. That's what we mean. It used to be that people could stay within their functional expertise and develop wonderful programs just for their functional expertise. Now the expectations are changing so that you will be expected not only to have your functional expertise, but to execute on that functional expertise within this whole AI structure that we're defining. That's what we mean by work fluency. That you have the fluency in your work processes to be able to tap into this AI layer, working horizontally across the organization. That actually leads up to, and I have an eye on the clock. I know we don't want to, because we're coming back to work fluency in the next video. I want to get into the next subject of this video, and that is what we talk about the 8 characteristics of the good leader. And by what the leader here is, it's not just the CEO. It's also all of the people on the C-suite team, all of the functional leaders. It's also the board directors. And all of these people probably have a good sense of what it takes to be a good leader, what it takes to be a good board director, what it means to lead a function successfully. And you and I would say that's all well and good, but you're talking industrial age. In fact, most of the literature that we see, and this includes in the business journals and the business books and what's taught in B schools and so forth, is talking about people being good leaders in terms of how it exists today and how it has existed in the past. It's not in terms of how do you have to operate as a good leader going forward into the age of AI. And I know you're coming out with a book, Tom, called Do You Fit? And do you fit as a good leader in the age of AI? Not just are you a good leader today, but are you developing the leadership capabilities to operate as a good leader in the age of AI, in this world where you need the work fluency, where you have to have not just your functional expertise, but also the work fluency, the ability to work within the AI insight layer. But more important for people operating at the C level and on the board of directors, can you run the organization as a whole, where everyone is going to have to develop the work fluency, where everyone's job is going to include this whole AI insight layer, the ability to operate with AI? You and I have both talked about, Tom, how we know that most organizations have people, particularly among the junior staff, who are using AM models. But how are they using them? They're using them for advanced search. They're using them to write memos that they don't know how to otherwise write. They're using them maybe to combine two documents into a synthesized document. This is all what we call productivity work. It's not the real AI work that you and I are talking about to drive the insights, the initiatives, the insight layer, the cooperation across the silos in an organization to meet organizational goals benefiting the entire organization. It's allowing people to stay down in a functional silo. It's not bringing them up out of the silos into the cross-functional work. You and I have talked, Tom, about how, along with AI, the organizational structures in organizations are going to change. No longer are you only going to have, say, a chief sales officer who only has maybe 5 people reporting up to him. When this chief salesperson operates in the new world with the expectation of tapping into all of the data and insight and working across the organization, that chief sales officer may have 10 direct reports and a whole bunch of dotted line reports, given how the jobs are going to change of people in this C-suite layer. Its C-suite is no longer functional, it's cross-organization, tapping into the AI layer. Similarly, we say that the board of directors can no longer say, well, I'm on the board because I understand the marketplace. Well, how can you tap into this AI insight layer as a board director to make sure that everyone across the C-suite understands your marketplace and develops a fuller understanding, not just of the marketplace, however you define marketplace, but of competitors and customers and business happenings and social happenings and industry happenings, everything. That's your definition of marketplace has changed to include all of this. And you as a board director need to know that and be able to use the AI tapping into the whole breadth of the understanding of a marketplace to be able to operate as providing oversight, your board role to the organization as the organization needs you to provide that oversight. This is what we're talking about when we say that the characteristics of a good board director or the characteristics of a good leader are changing, have to change to address how the roles are evolving in this age of AI. And your book, the book that is coming out in what, about a month or so, Tom?
I'm thinking September, Deirdre.
Okay.
The way I'm functioning these days is probably going to be September, but
Well,
yes,
capturing everything that's happening, actually.
yes.
So the second book that's coming out, your first book, Ahead of the Machine, is already out. But the book, Do You Fit? Leadership in the AI Age, will be coming out now in September. We'll be talking about how all of these leadership roles are changing, given this whole concept of operating horizontally, operating with an AI insight layer, operating out of your functional silo with work fluency. Now, what we can do to provide a a very top level understanding, Tom, not getting down at all into what you'll be talking about in your book, is to maybe look at some of these characteristics and just talk a little bit about how they're going to change. For example, one of your characteristics, and I'm jumping right into the middle of the stack, is to have a bias for action.
Yes.
Well, bias for action. We want our leaders to be out there making decisions, executing on the decisions, getting the work done, and delivering results. But then when you're operating with someone on the cusp of changing into an AI-driven organization that's operating horizontally with an AI insight layer, a bias for action means a bias for action in that mode, not in the mode of being a functional leader, getting results out of your function. It's operating as a cross-functional leader with a whole slew of reports from all over the organization, having to deliver results not just for your function, but for the organization as a whole. So that whole characteristic of a bias for action changes when you say a bias for action for what?
For what? Yes.
For what? And how do you operate as that person with a bias for action out of your silo and operating for the organization as a whole? Another one is basic one is remaining an expert in your field and the marketplace. All well and good, but that's a functional characteristic. And all of our listeners know by now, I'm going to say remain expert in what? In how? It's this work fluency. You've got to remain a functional expert. Functional expertise is not frozen. Functional expertise is always developing. I mean, you and I know, Tom, that every day functional expertise changes. And the person, I'm picking on the chief salesperson, but we all know, for example, that the use of some of the SaaS sales tools is changing by the day as those tools develop. And so the way you want your sales team to work operating these tools is going to change by the day. And you, as the chief salesperson, must operate and keep that functional expertise absolutely top level if you're going to run your function that way. But similarly, because of the whole concept of work fluency, you have to remain expert in the work fluency as well. Not just as a functional expert, but what's going on in this AI insight layer? What's going on across the whole organization? If the SaaS tools are changing in sales, how are they changing in marketing? And what does that mean when sales and marketing interact? And how do I have to instruct my salespeople and get my salespeople to see the work of marketing differently so sales and marketing are working differently? And we're tapping into the marketing data and the competitive information. And we're seeing what new competitors, market researchers coming up with as the marketplace changes. That's what I mean about remaining expert in the work fluency. It's what's going on in the rest of the organization as everyone in the organization taps into the AI layer. Another one that we can look at, Tom, is building teams. It used to be that the salesperson was just building the sales team. Now the salesperson is, yes, building the sales team, but also having all of these an increasing number of direct reports, including the dotted line direct reports from across the organization. What does that mean in terms of building a team? Your team as the chief sales organization is not just your salespeople. It's all of the people who report up to you directly or in a dotted line way. So you're building a comprehensive, probably some sort of comprehensive marketing, sales, marketplace understanding team, whatever you call this team. And that's your team, and it is your responsibility to make sure that everyone on this broader team is operating at a level that delivers the results for the organization as a whole. This is your work fluency expertise. So we could continue to go down through these characteristics, and I may turn it over to you to go over them some more, Tom, because I know you have very strong feelings about some of these. But that's the idea that the work fluency expertise operates in your changing job, given how your job changes in the world of AI. And the guiding question, do you fit, is for this new world where your job is evolving in the world of AI. It's not just, are you a good leader, the way the leadership books say you are a good leader now, but it's 2 years from now. Will you still fit in that leadership job? And with that, Tom, over to you.
I think that an example of what does this mean practically? So take that you and I, we function this way today.
Right.
We go deep and we go broad. And it's really about a 50-50 mix, and it's hard to do. And it's not easy to execute. So literally, and Deirdre, you know this, every day I spend the bulk of my morning on deep work, going deep, and not going horizontal. And so it's not on work fluency, it's really on establishing that fundamental base. But for me, as it is with any person running a business, and it is for you too, we are doing deep research on vastly different things all the time.
Right.
This morning I was doing deep research on a very interesting topic I can't wait to get back to because it's not what I was thinking. Yesterday, as you know, I was going deep on, what is Alex Karp doing? And then also another shot on this whole idea behind what's going on at Apple and the transition of the leadership teams, the backgrounds of the people, and how do they mix, and what the needs are and the demands are and what the forecast. So I was going deep on that to try to understand that better. Now, then you have to flip it to say, okay, what does that mean in terms of thought leadership? Because we see our job as trying to drive thought leadership for CEOs and board directors. And then on top of that, showing you the playbook of how to use it. So it's not good enough. You and I don't think it's good enough anymore to be a thought leader. We don't care. Who cares? What they care about is not just the thought leadership. They want to know, what do I do? How do I
Right.
now translate that thought leadership into a playbook that I can use?
Right.
And how do I use it? And that's why you, for example, today wanted to take time and say, let's just make sure you understand it. So as you start to try to use these ideas, you've got a better picture. So for me, then, I have to turn the attention, and it's usually when you and I begin to discuss things where I have to go on the horizontal and I have to start thinking, what does this mean? What does it mean now for us for what we're going to be doing in terms of the content? And those of you who, and I know there are some that are saying, well, Tom, we know you produce books, and we're starting to see them after a little bit of a drought for a few years. Um, where's Deirdre in this? Because Deirdre has just as many, if not better thoughts than you have. Well, we're going to fix that, right, Deirdre? Because
We
starting
have a
soon,
book ready to go in a month. That's
right?
the book that's coming out in a
Well,
month.
starting soon,
Plus
Deirdre is going to
a number lined up here. Yes. Uh-huh.
soon Deirdre is going to be producing thought papers on a regular basis that will point the way. And then those thought papers will point the way. And then I imagine there'll be times when she'll do playbooks, but most of the playbooks will come in this video form where we can discuss them and show you how. But Deirdre will very soon, and my guess is, Deirdre, knowing you, you're going to make sure the the Voyager folks get your thought leadership pieces before the rest of us do. Um,
Absolutely, as soon as they're done. And then they'll be distributed via our newsletter. Yes.
right. But I think you're going to start out with work fluency is I think one of the
Work
things you're
Fluency,
going to
the
go
first
with is
one
to is
next
to
Friday.
yeah,
Yes.
is to start doing that. So those, and I know there are a number of people that, as I've mentioned before, unfortunately for me, Deirdre has more fans than I do in this game, but that's okay. I mean, you're part of our family, Deirdre. So I take credit. I appreciate the fact that you have a fan club that's bigger than mine, and I like it. So you're going to hear from Deirdre. Deirdre's going to do thought pieces that'll be published soon. So we're all happy about that. But I would say that it's that practice of practicing. You don't have an excuse any longer to not have the research. This is what drives you and me crazy, Deirdre, about journalism today. There's no excuse for journalists that don't have the facts. There's no excuse. It's too easy now. It doesn't take days of study. It doesn't take hours of study. It takes minutes of study. And there's no excuse. The tools are at your hands. And the same thing applies to all of us, that it's there. So whether you choose to do this or not is less of a difficult choice because you can learn things. You can learn incredible things. You just have to know how to look. And fundamentally, you and I believe part of what good education is all about is not only exposing you to a broad base of information and broad base of thought leadership in various subjects, whether it be music or art or beauty or whatever, or science or technology, but it's also the use of it
Mhm.
and how do you get it so that later on in life, you know how to research, you know how to do these things, because that's not going away. In fact, if anything, the skills of communication, verbal, written, uh, judgment, uh, being able to discern, prioritize, redirect. Uh, we see this constantly in the work you and I do with using AI models to assist us in thinking, thought partnership until we get to your and my level. So I'll be working, and then I get to the level of discussing with Deirdre, and then I go back and have to redirect the direction I'm going in because Deirdre, and she did it again this morning, convinced me that there was a subtlety that was not coming through in the work I was doing. Even though she knew it was there, she said it's not coming through. It's a matter. I don't remember what you said, Deirdre, but it was a matter of emphasis or something along those lines.
It was this whole idea about how the work of the leader changes between the current age and the future age, and how that affects the characteristics.
Yes, and a subtlety, and you made this point to me, it was about this bias for action that you just talked about,
Right.
and that was the example you used with me, and it
Right.
becomes crystal clear. If you're not functioning in the age of intelligence and you don't see the world that way, then your bias for action may not be contextually correct. You may be missing that. And I use the term age of intelligence for a reason as we were talking about this morning, it may be because of the context of artificial intelligence and perhaps LLMs today, but tomorrow it may be quantum. It may be that LLMs or the AI model universe has become part of the function of what we do every day. It's a given. It's as Ken calls it, headless software. Right? It's just
Right.
kind of there, and you then your issue is become okay. What's the next turn? Well, the next turn is quantum, and if you want to bend your mind, start trying to explain quantum to yourself first,
Right.
much less teach it. But 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 this is what we mean by that. That it's and Deirdre's point to me was on standards. That, as you said, Deirdre, it may be one thing to say that you build teams and you build them well, but build them, as you said, for what?
Right.
right? And for what kind of end result do you want? And this is my say, if I'm picking up, and Tim Cook is a brilliant individual, brilliant, and a strategic thinker. And if he's doing what I think he is, he's doing that switch from vertical to horizontal. And he sees it, and he sees the capabilities in that kind of thing in Turnus. And that he sees that embodiment there. And look, that's a brilliant move if it is, by the way, it may be brilliant for a completely different reason and maybe a lot better decision than my way of thinking, right? But we can envision it. But it took a lot of work on my part to go deep and understand it better. That's the point. It's the implication. What does it mean for everyone going forward? Now, I've said enough because you want to preserve a little bit of this for tomorrow's video or next week's video and because we want to go a little bit deeper on the actual application of this. What does it really mean? How do you apply it specifically? And we'll pick, certain things that we can go through about how to do this. So with that, Deirdre, I'm gonna turn it over to you to take us to the end here.
Right. I think I want to end on a point I made earlier, which is that good leaders develop instincts about how to do their jobs. Good leaders know how to assess and learn how to assess information, know how to make decisions quickly, and so forth. What we're positing in this change of the characteristics of the good leader is that your instincts have to change as well. And it's not as if all of a sudden you have to learn a completely new way of thinking. It's just developing through practice a new way of thinking that is horizontal, that does include the greater amount of data and information in a new type of value equation, that does interact with people within the organization in a broader sense, expecting everyone to be operating up at that same level as well. No longer can people make excuses that, oh, they were down in their function. Everyone will be expected to be up at this level. And it doesn't take much to change your instincts. I think, Tom, both you and I have already started to shift our instincts into
Yes.
this new way of working, where we're looking at some people, reading the business press and saying, what in the world was that person thinking? Well, that person was thinking according to old instincts. And that person, as soon as they change their instincts, I'm sure will be doing the better job that we know they're capable of doing again. So even while what we're talking about sounds new to a lot of people, your way of thinking will start to change once you start to work in this new way. And I think that's the point to stop, Tom, in that in our next video, as we get deeply, deeply into this whole concept of work fluency, we'll be showing you how your daily work changes, how your thinking changes as you go about learning a new work fluency up in this AI insight layer. So, with
Deirdre,
that,
it's always a pleasure.
Tom, always a pleasure. Okay, so long for now.
Bye.